Hello, and welcome to this enlightening discourse championed by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria as its contribution towards uplifting businesses to loftier dimensions of great good for the greater number of our society. And just like the naughty dilemma of the chicken and the egg, one cannot really say which one comes first in Nigeria. Is it corruption? Or is it fake and substandard goods and services? In any matter how we look at it, one thing sticks. Both of them are the bane of our traumatized polity. Fake and substandard products are killing Nigeria in the same way that corruption is. This leaves a huge dilemma for the king now in quotes. And who is this king in business? The consumer, of course. And so joining me in our guest question and answer segment of our ICAN on Air program today to throw insights into the positive moves to confront this dilemma for Nigeria is Babatunde Irukera, Esquire, who by definition is the Executive Vice Chairman and the Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCP for short. That was former Consumer Protection Council. His record of advocacy and representation on competition and consumption issues is exceptional. And he provides clarity, guidance that both that commission provides the industry fully in need of addressing issues of customer service, customer protection, promoting a level playing field in the Nigerian marketplace, and ensuring regulatory stability. Please stay connected as we unveil and get more knowledge from our guests in this question and answer segments. Also, in this offering, we will naturally be showing you a couple of adverts, bits, and tips on the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, the foremost accountancy body that we have in sub-Saharan Africa. Please stay connected. We will be back with you shortly. Please join me as I welcome Babatunde Irukera onto ICAN on Air. You are most welcome, Mr. Irukera. Maybe you are muted.
Sorry, good evening, sir. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You are most welcome. And looking at that subject, I just wonder how I remember back in the days of Dora Akunyili, Dora Akunyili, some of the questions she's always asks is that the head, the toes, the hands are also challenged when it comes to these substandard products. A feat which I perceive as you are going to be showing us, you've taken to higher standards. And I wanted us to just draw a kind of overview of this subject on how you would describe substandard products in light of your mandate at FCCP and the role of SON, Standard Organization of Nigeria, in a manner that does not naturally overlap.
Thank you. That's a very good question. I have said in different places on multiple occasions that my sense of the substandard infiltration and perhaps even prevalence of substandard products in Nigeria is actually a state of emergency
Mm,
across the board
mm,
in food, in drinks, in material, metal, all fast moving consumer goods, and many things. And we have a big problem. Uh, I worry, even though I don't have the data, that I think we probably exchange in commerce more substandard products than original products. And substandard products is otherwise mischaracterized as something that doesn't meet certain satisfaction quotients for consumers.
mm,
So that's not entirely what it is. Counterfeit is substandard.
mm,
So products that are portrayed or passed off as what they are not, whether from a standard standpoint, from a labeling standpoint, or from a substantive originality standpoint, are substandard. And when you consider that broad definition of what substandard products are, then you certainly should become really concerned
mm,
about the magnitude of the problem in Nigeria.
mm,
Indeed, SON is the custodian of standards. They create the standards based on a process that involves many stakeholders, and they ensure conformity. They do the conformity assessments, the good manufacturing practices, and all the different other methods.
mm,
But there are many issues, uh, as you probably know, and from your introduction, you recognize that. Many difficult problems with respect to maintaining standard. One of it is the fact that our intellectual property regimes are not entirely as fastidious as they would be in other places.
mm,
Secondly, is that we have many borders. There are too many access points to bring things into the country. Thirdly, is that we have a booming domestic industry in an otherwise relatively poor economy where employment constitutes one of the largest challenges, and small and medium scale businesses are not sufficiently regulated and also present the strongest option for people to find work or any means of livelihood, as a matter of fact.
mm, mm,
And so when you
mm,
combine all these factors, and of course you have endemic corruption, and many times people consider corruption from a government standpoint, but
mm,
there's private to private corruption, there's business to business corruption, and then there is a supply of corruption requests even from businesses to the government. And
mm,
so the combination of all these factors certainly are the perfect storm for a thriving substandard market. The only
mm,
thing that I haven't said which for me is not any less grievous, perhaps even more grievous, is a permissiveness from name and major brands who, by their conduct, not only tolerate but even encourage counterfeiting and substandard products.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
is the poor tracking and tracing culture. In my role in consumer protection, we've been confronted with situations where products were difficult to track, in the sense that even the known brand names who made the products were not they were not adequate or efficient in providing tracking and tracing protocols and processes. And what we've discovered is that even though they're displeased and don't want their products to be counterfeited, they also want the excuse or the deniability of being able to say, well, that product that has gone bad is not ours, because they think it a potential harm to their reputation,
Hmm.
to admit
Excellent.
that something has gone wrong. So that's the totality
Excellent.
of what I think the problem is.
Yeah, no. And from what you have done, like it says in management science, the fishbone analysis of the problem definition, that is quite clear. I would like to ask you, Mr. Irukera, haven't
Yes.
identified these wide gamuts of problems, both internal and external, and ask you what are the tools at your permissible disposal to curb the menace of some substandard products in Nigeria?
Well, I'll speak about the tools, but it's important for us not to mistake having those tools for meaning that the totality of those tools provide an effective oversight framework or enforcement mechanisms. Um,
Correct.
the law is our greatest tool. There's several provisions within the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act that empowers the FCCPA, either acting by itself or acting in conjunction with other regulators, to investigate, seal businesses, conduct tests of products, material testing, product testing, demand information, issue directives, guidelines, and guidance documents, and even make regulations. And we use all these tools. But because of the nature of our markets, and most of our markets are informal, and the way they're structured is such that you can readily make victims of victims. I'll give you a quick example. When we were coming out of the lockdowns last, I want to say 2020, not 2021, in 2020, about June, July, after we had about 3 months starting in March of lockdown, I thought to myself that one of the big problems we would have are expired goods getting into the market, because the supply chain and distribution networks had been at rest for 3 months. And so we developed a framework, a mechanism for checking distribution companies and their warehouses. And what we found was just incredibly heartbreaking. Companies that were just pushing out about to expire products. Understandably, so for a product that has a shelf life of 6 months and there's been a lockdown for 3 months, and you have a policy that says that the shelf life must be at least 90 days for you to distribute it. And you've got shelf lives of 30 days, 20 days, and you're quickly pushing that out. And the ones that are 10 days, you're doing what you call liquidation sales, getting retailers to just buy it at any price to go and find a way to sell it. And so if we go into the market and just apprehend these retailers or confiscate these products, they're also victims. And so we have to find mechanisms of stopping substandard, expired, or counterfeit goods at some point before it gets into the market, because the retail market makes it late. The organized retail market, whether it's the ShopRite, the SPARs, the major supermarkets, they still account for less than 5% of what is retailed. The stalls in the market, woman outside your gate. Those people sell far more of the products you find in supermarkets or otherwise. And so we do have the tools, but we still have to use the tools in a way that is meaningful and sensible and promotes commerce, especially medium and small scale businesses. So testing, investigations, penalties, sealing, those are all different tools that we use.
Excellent point, Mr. Irukera. I'm enthused that you've spoken about surveillance, you've spoken about enforcement, spoken about investigation, and perhaps, of course, recall, etc. Some of these tools at your disposal to curb substandard products in circulation. However, I would like to know what role the Commission plays concerning advocacy, awareness, and what is the rationale for such guidance?
And so we have a consumer education department, and they develop messages, which we use as jingles, sometimes a television program. But what I've also discovered, and it's interesting that you'd ask this question, it's actually a very fundamental question. What I've discovered also is that our
Yes, to our listeners, we might have a
sorry.
bit of a. Oh, you are back. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And so we develop messages, we have channels, but what channel can one agency that has approximately 9 offices and 200 and something people have to get to the whole country, especially people outside the urban or suburban areas in a very, very diverse country like Nigeria, where cultures are different and you have multiple languages. And so one of the things we're doing right now, which we think is a very effective method, is as part of the responsibility, social responsibility of companies, is to carry consumer protection awareness messages. Companies have mastered how to advertise their products, how to get it into every home, how to make a child in Zamfara or a child in my village or a child in Bayelsa prefer a brand of a soft drink or candy or anything to the other, because they found a way to message and gain custom or patronage. And so those vehicles that they use are by far the most effective vehicle to reach everywhere in the country. And so the new guidance documents will mandate that companies carry some of the messages, including how to identify their own products so that people are not taking in and buying substandard products. So that's one of the key consumer education and awareness efforts that we're pursuing right now.
Excellent point. And I like to say, well done. Some of the things that our Institute Chartered Accountants of Nigeria prescribes as professionals is preventive rather than proactive. And so education, advocacy, and awareness. And then so we still come back as being counters. That's what we are called, accountants. I would say that for some Nigerian manufacturers and producers, will you say it would be right to give this opinion that there is a direct relationship between their high cost of operations, which of course will include insecurity, lack of power, bad road, okay, multiple taxes, etc., and the volume of substandard products that they keep churning out? Would there be a direct relationship in your view?
That's such an incredible question, and I mean, I'm amazed that you can find the linear connection between that. And so there are two things. At the end of the day, applicable standards as a matter of law are standards. where input, the factors you've rightly identified as inputs, are legitimate and understandable in driving prices. Compromising standards in order to keep prices down is not to the benefit of consumers either. And there is a potential consumer protection and even competition violation that is associated with lowering standards in order to maintain margins. Because what that does is that someone wants to operate without complying with the rules and sell at the same price as someone who complies with the rules. And so there will be, I cannot find any conceivable or acceptable explanation, argument that will mitigate failure to put the appropriate products in the market on the ground of infrastructure deficits or other significant input costs.
Beautiful point there. Again, quantitative, qualitative, and as ICAN, as a professional association, and I dare say as one of the first in this country, I will be interested in asking you, what guidance will you provide to aid us? Of course, we give services, we give some standardized products in technology, entrepreneurship. What guidance will you provide to aid us to comply with the FCCPA concerning your general mandate on consumer protection and specific mandate on competition in a manner that doesn't run foul of your provision? When I say your provision, I'm talking of FCCPA. Given that we, as an association, we also aim to protect the interests of our members.
This is a very fantastic point. I mean, and you know, I give you so much credit for this because you're hitting key issues, which not only is a matter for the people you advise, for your members who work in companies, it's a potential issue of exposure. I'll give you a quick example from a competition standpoint. And that is that I use cartels, for instance, discussing commercially sensitive information, things like pricing, methodology, and all that amongst competitors is a criminal conduct. And it can lead to significant penalties for the company and jail term for the individuals who are engaged in the perpetration. And sometimes the directors of a company. And for your members who are on the inside, that's important information for them to know. For your members who act as directors, that's important information for them to know. And for your members who act as auditors, perhaps they're able to spot some of those things. So if you're looking at audit and you're seeing that the company is attending professional association meetings, and somehow as part of your audit, you're looking at minutes and you're seeing things that happen there and some cost issues. For instance, if a company is making an expenditure on a platform, so if you see that there's a lot of costs associated with doing dinner with companies that are competitors, you're going to flag it and say, well, I see that you're meeting with your competitors a lot from this audit. It's good to know what you're meeting about and the scope of the discussions, just in case you may be violating of the law. And then from an association standpoint, associations are not exempt from the law. Associations are allowed to discuss and ways to promote standards in the association, and even things that promote public interest, maybe pricing from a standpoint of what is fair. But to the extent that associations come together to decelerate competition by trying to agree on what they consider a fair cost or fees for professional services, that's potentially problematic. It can lead to penalties for the members of the association, and in certain circumstances for the association itself. From the consumer protection standpoint, the law encourages associations to come up with mechanisms on the inside, including developing internal standards of conduct and services, which the Commission would adopt and support them in enforcing. And so there are many, many ways where professional associations such as ICAN, and specifically ICAN, can collaborate and support the Commission, and can also internally ensure that it's protecting its members, and also provide the right counsel and advice to clients to prevent or avoid exposure.
Excellent point. Thank you. Two things I'm picking up from there. Ignorance cannot be an excuse. Governance is key, and collaborations and looking at our internal control, which is the linchpin of our profession. Looking at audit, looking at and one of the things that we have always advocated to governments and policymakers is that we need to streamline and ensure that forensics, which again is our forte, it's always been with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, should be left not to the mediocres, please pardon my language, but should be left to the real, true practitioners. Almost like you give your building to quacks, and then you get those buildings coming down with attendant cost to lives and property. If you are just joining us, our online participants, for close to 30 minutes, I have engaged the chief samurai of FCCP, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, on this very important subject of the Nigerian consumer and the challenge of substandard products, all embracing, all encompassing. It affects us as professionals and friends of the profession to be able to lift our country higher. You will have some questions. Please, would like it to be fielded, and we can take them. While you are putting that together, we'll go on a very short break. Please stay on. Don't go away. We will soon be back with our guests. You're welcome. You are not muted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Or a little glitch. And welcoming back our online participants and from
I cannot hear the. I think you broke off. I can't hear you anymore.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you now, sir.
Sorry about the glitch. So making the point that as professional institutes, our continuous education program, which ICAN on Air, is coming as a key plan to educate not just professionals, even students, on a ready reckoner kind of to help guide us. Online participants, if you have questions, please flash them. We'll be able to ask distinguished guests. And for online participants, I like to also let you know that we are open to adverts. Our online program goes to the nooks and crannies of the world. When I say the world, of our universe, where we can carve adequate niche for you in that direction. So you are welcome back. And before we went on break, Mr. Irukera, we were talking about penalties. We did agree that ignorance of the law will not be an excuse. And so we have a due diligence, both in governance and ensuring that we dig deep to advise our clients and advise ourselves so that we don't run into trouble. And you spoke generally about penalties. And I wanted us to maybe drill down a little bit on that. Is it possible for you to discuss briefly some of the potential penalties for the circulation of substandard products?
Well, yes, actually, the FCCPA makes certain provisions with respect to different uh, things, and the penalties range from whether it's a substandard product based on misrepresentation or mischaracterization, or whether it's from a failure to comply with applicable prevailing standards, and ranging from sometimes up to 10% of the annual turnover of the preceding year of the company, and jail terms for individuals involved, sometimes between 2 years and up to 3 years, sometimes 4 years in the law. So, depending on the different components or issues that have combined to create this subject of violation or the offense, the penalties could be that steep.
Mm,
I
mm,
think sometimes the lowest penalty sometimes could be as little as maybe 5 million naira, 10 million naira. But yeah, it could go all the way up to 10% of turnover.
mm. And from your experience, perhaps in the past few years, how have offenders been complying? Do they raise
So,
their hands and they say, no, we cannot pay? And if that cannot happen, what then happens?
and so the new law that makes these provisions became effective in 2019. And
Okay.
what we did was to spend most of 2019 and part of 2020 in advocacy and sensitization, that guys understand that the landscape has changed, and we're not going to be whacking people immediately, but we want people to get to understand and become familiar with the law. But we had a few investigations that opened in 2021, and some of them would hit the news waves soon, where significant penalties, including, a company that's going to pay several hundreds of millions of naira. And we've got at least 3 cases in court where we're prosecuting individual employees of companies, and unless it ends in a plea bargain, that where we agree to no custodial sentence, if it goes all the way to conviction, there's possibility that people will go to jail.
Wow, awesome. That sounds that sounds beautiful, and I will not exactly want to throw you under the bus. But before I ask that question, Ayuba Quadri Yemi is asking this. It says, how feasible is it to discover those that are producing substandard products locally? And what effort is government making in identifying these people?
That's a very good question also, and it is difficult. I can assure you that it is very difficult. But I would shock you by saying that from my conversations and the knowledge from SOM, Customs, NAFDAC, we have a bigger problem with imported substandard products than locally produced. Locally produced, if you have SONCAP or if you have MANCAP, they know where you are, and the periodic checks on your factory and your facilities. So it's really mostly smuggled products. And then, yes, but you have things like those who are bottling water, wine, all kinds of things, shoes, especially in the Southeast. And some of those operations are very dangerous. I remember recently when I personally led an operation in Uyo with respect to interdicting substandard rice. The CG of Customs had to deploy a special team to travel through the night from Owerri to meet with me in Uyo. And it was quite a dangerous operation because these people are quite dangerous. And some of the markets in the Southeast where some of these things occur, where people with superior firearms to law enforcement. And so the way we proceed is to gather as much intelligence as we can. In the coming months, we're going to have a joint operation that includes military, civil defense, police, and regulators. That's what it takes. And that's why I said that I've repeatedly said this is a national emergency, that you can't just leave it to regulators. Some of these people are very dangerous and very well armed, that it requires them some military confrontation. And so I think in the coming, for 2022 and 2023, this is very high up on the list of enforcement initiatives, and hopefully that will begin to address local informal, which is usually mostly informal production of counterfeit products.
Thank you very much for that answer, Mr. Irukera. And that takes me to wanting to throw you under the bus, but not exactly. ICAN cares. Yes, of course we care. And I will not, for the life of me, not want to ask you this very personal question as a professional, because I see you mentioned a couple of the SON, you also mentioned NAFDAC. And NAFDAC reminds us as professionals of a poster child that we had in that agency of blessed memory, Professor Dora Akinyele, and she had to confront drug barons. And when she was not going to compromise, we all know the story of how only the Almighty God saved her, from assassins' bullets. In other words, you can't join them. There are people who believe that they can buy their way out there, and if you do not succumb as a regulator, you may be on your own. My question, therefore, is this. You already hinted it. You went to you, and then, of course, to Owerri. Do you get scared in the course of carrying out your duties? Especially, as you said in your words, you have people, non-state actors with firearms out all there. Do you and your people get scared? If so, is there any guarantees that you are getting from government? We don't want to lose you. Is there any guarantees you are getting from government just to ensure that you carry out your duties dutifully with utmost integrity?
I mean, it's an existential apprehension that you could become injured or even potential fatality when you go against criminals. I mean, the substandard market across the board in every area. It's a big market, very big market. I mean, people who sell contraband, counterfeited products in this country are very dangerous, very powerful, very well resourced. And so the short answer to your question, is there a reason for apprehension? Oh yes. Have we been confronted with situations where we were concerned for our safety, or that I'm concerned for my personal safety or the safety of the team that I work with? Yeah, yeah. And even non-physical feedback that makes you apprehensive about investigations that you're conducting. Yeah, they do occur. But I would say though that I w- I haven't come into any situation where I felt that there was imminent danger of loss of life. I've been confronted openly that I was concerned that it could result in bodily harm, but I'm not sure I've been confronted with what I thought was loss of life. But have I gotten feedback and intel and internal communication that says that with what you're doing and the apprehension in certain quarters, the threat to your life is existential? Yes, I've gotten that. What are the options? We're still going to do our work the best we can. The government provides both personal security and operational security when we go to do our work, but we don't have enough of that. In the process of engaging law enforcement and the security agencies about more robust security for our operatives and for our operations.
Okay, beautiful. And you can be sure that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria will continue to wish you well in this your onerous task. Of course, naturally, like Siamese twins, will always be there to guide, yes, to lend support, if only because integrity and accuracy is our motto. And that's the way to go. I'm back. As we round up, Mr. Irukera, I know there are challenges with the internet not being so stable. We talk about safety first. So we think in terms of attitude now, what do you think can be done to ensure that typical or average Nigerian consumer considers safety as his or her priority before going for any product at all?
Many things is for consumers to become very discriminatory. I think education to let consumers know, one, substandard products potentially constitute danger
No doubt.
to health, to life, whether it's substandard cement or metals or iron that can lead to a building collapse, or a substandard medication where the active ingredient doesn't meet the threshold, or something you drink, water or anything, that could be the problem. And so people need to know that substandard products, by their very nature, it doesn't matter what the price is, they're dangerous. That's the starting point. And then consumers need to know that those who sell them goods and services owe them an obligation. And they don't think that it's a favor. And so they should be more discriminatory. One of our key mottos in the commission is demand and insist. Demand on your rights, insist on them. I suspect half of the rights violations will be addressed in the consumer space if consumers demand and insist on their rights. And the remaining half that are not addressed, we, the regulators, will step in and do what we can.
Excellent. Excellent point. And while we round up, may I have your final word on this subject of the Nigerian consumer and the challenge or dilemma that he or she faces on substandard products?
First, I'd like to thank ICAN for inviting. I think this is quite unusual. It's actually unprecedented by the premier professional associations of the key professions in the country. So you're setting what really is an example by inviting us. Secondly, is that this is the first time experiencing a platform of this nature by a professional association, especially not a trade association, one of the repute of ICAN. I think it's phenomenal. It's groundbreaking. And I think if other regulators would make the time to come here, it's also game changing. And closing, I'd like to say that quite unlike many times when dealt with interviews or journalists, the thought process, the sheer research and industry that has gone into the questioning and how you've managed this engagement is absolutely outstanding. And I suppose it underscores what really is the difference between your profession and you as an individual and what is out there. I want to encourage you, and the reason why I think it's not praise singing, but it's to encourage you that what you've done and what you're doing is actually part of the regulatory framework for a better Nigeria. So thank you very much.
I must thank you, and those thanks must go really to the iconic 57th President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, Mrs. Comfort Tayo, CPA, FCA, MNI, and our team of well-seasoned editorial team who work behind the scene, the back end team, for bringing this to fore. We are going to be calling on you more and more. And I'd like to also, in saying goodbye, thank our online participants who found it very educative. This is not going to be the end. We'll keep naturally at this. Our next offering is going to be on Tuesday, January the 18th, 2022, 6 p.m. West African time. Venue, of course, will be ICAN online social media handles. Please tell somebody, like, so that you can be prompted on. And so, Tuesday, January 18, 2022, we are going to be reviewing another very germane topic, which is reviewing the changing regulatory landscape in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The PIA was signed by Mr. President. So let's just look at it. And our guests for that segment will be Oladipo Maye, FCA, who is a partner, oil, gas, and power in Anderson LP, Nigeria. So it's quite an experienced executive in business structuring for tax efficiency, Sabone's Oxley reviews, and an expert in that industry. Let me leave you with this quotation. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of intelligent efforts. End of quote. And that is ascribed to John Ruskin, who lived between 1819 and 1900. And as I always say, be the change you will like to see. And it will come your way. January 18, 2022, please make it a point. Don't just soak this knowledge. Tell somebody else. ICAN, the new ICAN, is sharing knowledge freely so that society can be better for it. So until come your way, January 18, 2022, I remain Aki Fatunke, your anchor, ICAN on air. Bye for now.